Welcome back, everybody. This is the Decentralized Technology live stream. I am Jon Radoff. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of a company called Beamable. What we do is gaming infrastructure. So gaming, online systems, social systems, economic systems, all the stuff you need to run an online game. But what we're really going to focus on today is the fusion of two really interesting worlds. User acquisition on the one hand, and then application of that within blockchain and what you can do with things like on-chain intelligence within this world. So if you've ever launched an app, whether it's a game or something else, you have had to acquire users. And hopefully you got most of them organically and you didn't have to spend any money. And if you did that, we all worship you because you are that very small percentage of 1% that is able to do it without investing capital in UA. I actually did this on the first game I launched. It was a Game of Thrones game. And it was back in the days when Facebook did not regulate fan pages. So we would spam the HBO fan page with basically ads, inviting people to come to the game. And we got unlimited users. We'd get when we did a post, it was like 10,000 users in 1 minute. Like that's how popular Game of Thrones was when we launched that. Sadly, that went away, but we didn't spend on Game of Thrones. We did start to spend on Star Trek, some money better than others. But we've got a world expert in this, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself in a moment, and that is Peter Jonas, who is at Facebook. For all I know, Peter, you were running the numbers on some of our accounts later.
I might have been the one that turned that loophole off.
Peter, can you tell us a little bit about your background just to start there, and then we'll get into Thirdwave and what you're doing today, what you've learned from UA and ads and all that stuff, and how the new world is different.
I am happy to. Nice to see you. Glad to be joining. My background is pretty diverse. So I've done a bunch of different things in my career. Most meaningfully is my time at Facebook. But before I started Thirdwave, which I'm sure we'll get into in a second, I actually was the president and executive chairman at Compass, the real estate technology company. So I scaled that from a few hundred people in the West to about 13,000 people across 167 offices and did 17 acquisitions, did a bunch of different things there. Before that, I was at Uber. I launched a handful of products there in my time. And then most meaningfully, before that, I was at Facebook. And so I was at Facebook in the early days when we had lots of games on the platform, but no revenue. I was responsible for really launching the first ads business around games for Facebook and verticalization, the first vertical at Facebook even way back in the day. Because that did so well, I was asked to figure out in the early days of mobile apps, how are we going to monetize this thing? And I was lucky enough to be able to be the first person focused on what became the mobile app install product and help to build that and roll that out with some of the best, the best engineers, product managers, and sales team that I've ever seen. And so very, very fortunate to have been there then, which really shaped not only our team here at Thirdwave, which is mostly Facebook people, but also my perspective on what is going to unlock growth in Web3 is heavily influenced by my time in those early days of mobile.
All right, so in a moment here, this is a message to the community. You have an opportunity here to ask Peter questions today. So we do this live so that the community gets a chance to ask questions. It's not often that you have access to someone like Peter, who has been there in the trenches at Facebook, launching mobile ad products. And let's face it, Peter, you were the man at Facebook. Like you were the guy who cranked the dollars.
I don't know if I was the man,
but one of the men.
I was definitely there
for the man. Let's say that.
I was really lucky to be there and got to work with some of the best advertisers in the world at a time when people really underestimated what was possible in mobile. And so there's a reason why one person was responsible. At one point, I was responsible for all of the global mobile app advertisers. And that was because even at Facebook, people wildly underestimated how big the mobile app ecosystem could get and the monetization that was possible if you brought in high value users. You brought up an interesting point earlier, John, that I don't want to let fly by. And it was this idea of like, man, I wish I could have organic users. We were sitting down with two of the, it was myself, my counterpart who ran the platform side of things, another person on my team. And we were sitting down with the two top mobile game CEOs in the world at the time. And my counterpart asked the question, should we be focusing on our efforts on getting the organic distribution, free users, as you put it, or optimizing so that you're able to spend more on ads? And the answer seems super, super obvious, but they did not give the obvious answer. They absolutely wanted us to focus our efforts on optimizing so that they could spend more on ads, because the relative value of those users was so much higher than what they were getting on the organic side. And they really like the control that comes with it. So anybody on this call that has benefited from organic growth, that's amazing. You're incredibly lucky. And frankly, that's just about the only thing that historically has been available in Web3. But the reality is, as many of you know, as soon as those channels stop working, you lose control over growth of your business. And that is a very, very hard thing to lose when you're in a position as a startup who's investing a huge amount of their revenue and of their venture funding into exactly this growing the business. And so I think it's a really interesting perspective that has not yet come to Web3, because there aren't tools that people are using to at scale grow their business outside of what would classically be considered organic. There just aren't enough of those. There aren't quite enough of those to go around, like the Game of Thrones posts on HBO's.
Yeah. Well, being on the most popular TV show at that time on the platform in an unregulated Facebook fan page was definitely the growth hack of the moment for us.
Oh, God. That was a monster. That was a monster.
And I did well with it. We got 11 million installs for that game, basically free of cost. So, but the world has changed. Let's talk about the mobile and just general online advertising. So online advertising industry is how big? How big's the mobile piece? And then how big is Web3? I think it's like small, right?
We could go into all the details on that. It's absolutely enormous. Gaming's is a very big chunk of each of those. The reality is Web3 is a tiny, tiny sliver. And so what you generally expect is for anything consumer facing to spend somewhere in the range of 15 at the low end, 30% at the high end of revenue on ads, depending on your payback window and how aggressive you are with your LTV. But the reality is, you aren't able to see anywhere near that percentage of revenue, or even people being aggressive at the front end today, because the tools just don't exist. And so what you're seeing is allocation of a focus on airdrops, which is an amazing tool, although kind of a blunt instrument, as it's turned out. And so you're going to get great users, some great users, you're going to get a lot of bad, non-users out of that. And so the percentage of revenue that's going back into ads in Web3, I would estimate is probably well less than 10% of revenue, if not far, far less than that, because there just aren't the right tools for it.
Okay, so Peter, I'd like you to think a little bit about what Web3 brings to the online advertising market. Like, what is going to be unique about this market? Obviously, you've identified a market gap and the need for UA there, but I'd like to also talk about, like, what are the inherent advantages that you've got with Web3 technology? Before you answer that, though, and speaking of communities and airdrops, well, Beamable is going to be doing an airdrop, and we've got millions of people competing on the leaderboard right now to be in that airdrop. 10,000 people are going to get the airdrop based on the leaderboard that we've set up. And a lot of you are watching right now and you've been waiting for that code. So last week, I mostly did it in the few minutes at the end. yesterday's or Wednesdays. I forget. I'm forgetting where I am at any point in time now. We did it in the middle. Today, I'm going to do it towards the beginning. So all of you who showed up early today and you're watching the whole live stream, you didn't just drop in halfway through, you are going to get to benefit with that code today. So the code today is WAVE, WAVE. Look down at the bottom and the ticker there and you see it. You've got 2 minutes. Sometimes people come by later and they're posting, hey, I entered the code. What happened? Well, it's here for when you're live and part of it. How do you get it? You go to the Discord, you type /claim, and then the code, which today is WAVE, WAVE. You've got 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes now. So go get that.
1 minute, 37 seconds. Hurry up.
There you go. Okay, so we're not going to spend more time on the code right now. But
John, we're going to need to hold off while I put it in myself.
Peter, well, I love it. We invite all our guests to participate in the leaderboard as well. Anyone who's listening here is not that airdrop hunter category. Like, you are actually the engaged people in the community, listening, learning, reposting, amplifying our message. So we're super grateful for all of you who are participating in the leaderboard and participating in the community hub we've set up. It's been incredible. We've got millions of signups for this thing, and we've been able to channel some of you at new game launches. We've had some cases where, speaking of UA, we've channeled this community to games that are launching, and they've had 100,000 signups in a day, and their Discord is filled up, and they've sold out NFT mints in the first day. So pretty amazing there. So there's one interesting thing about Web3. Like, Web3 doesn't have quite that kind of advertise. It's not really, we don't think of it as advertising. We just think of it as community building. But Peter, what are some of the advantages from your perspective that Web3 brings to user acquisition and growth of applications?
I think community building by another name in this scenario, I do think, so there are 3 elements that I think about when I think about what is like native to Web3 that are most meaningful. The first one is exactly what you just said. Web 2 does not have the ability to rally communities to take actions the way that Web 3 does, and so that is a hugely impactful element of this. The airdrop is one of the vehicles; it's one of the tools for doing that. I think of it, the airdrop, as this, what could be this beautiful instrument that sometimes, like a guitar that is out of tune. Sometimes it's in tune, sometimes it's out of tune, sometimes it's played by someone who is great on the guitar, sometimes it's not. And so I think that this is a tool that could be extraordinarily valuable. I think we've seen instances where it has really worked very well. And then we've seen instances where people have completely blown it, where they've, through airdrops, have dismantled all of the community goodwill that they've built, have brought in the airdrop hunters versus the real enthusiasts for what the project is focused on. So I think that's a really key element. What you guys are doing is exactly the sort of thing that everyone should be doing, because I think that is going to yield a far higher quality output. That's the first thing. The second thing is really getting back to the primitives of blockchain. And so the second thing, what we think is the most important element, is the persistent ID. And so the wallet ID is the most powerful persistent identifier that's ever been created. This means that your behavior in a pseudonymous way is known, and as a result, your relative value can be predicted. And that has a huge impact on the ability for people to be able to reach those people, to reward those people, etc., based on their relative value. I always say this, and my team is absolutely sick of hearing me say it by now, but I always say the same thing. Every user has a value, it's just not the same value. And the only way to understand what the distinct value is to look at the wallet IDs and understand their on-chain history. History will absolutely be rewarded in Web3, full stop. At some point, there will be greater rewards that come from having history. I think the Magic Eden rolled out a program, I guess it was probably 1.5 years ago now, that rewarded people for their wallet history. We haven't seen nearly enough of that, but it absolutely is something I think will be very valuable over time. And the ability to understand the relative value of a user is going to be critical. The third piece that links back, this other primitive that links back to the first one of community, and they're very complementary, is the idea of exchange of value. Never before has it been easier to exchange value with all parties that are involved in some sort of customer, client, consumer interaction. And so in the traditional world, I go to Facebook, I buy ads, that person then comes in, plays my game, and the utility that they get is really built on my game, my project, my application, whatever it may be. In our world, there is the ability to actually utilize the fact that with blockchain and crypto, you can actually reward people for the actions that they're taking, similar to how you're doing this pre-airdrop. And so rewarding people for being able to actually to take actions that add value to the community. You referred someone in, that should be rewarded. You got to level 3, that should be rewarded. You've checked in on an application every day for the last 30 days. That should be rewarded. All of these things can now be rewarded in a way that wasn't possible before. And what is going to be most magical about this like unlock of Web3 growth ultimately is going to be the combination of 1, 2, and 3, really led by number 2, which is that persistent identifier.
Peter, you got a comment from the community here. They like the poster behind you. I was wondering, is that related to Facebook in any way? Because I remember Zuckerberg was put in early Facebook. I don't know if it even persisted, but he put all these posters of these famous sayings on the wall. And I know he was a big fan of the classics, and that
This is one of my favorite ones. It comes from those days. In the early days, I don't know if they do it still, but you go into the micro kitchens and there'd be 20 of them sitting on that had been allocated. I grabbed a bunch of them. This one's my favorite.
So speaking of Facebook, Peter, like what did you learn from Facebook that applies directly to what you're doing now with a Web3 user acquisition platform? Or is it just completely different?
I think what people don't recognize about the unlocking of mobile growth was and I don't know, and it'd be cool to see in the comments how many of you were running ads on mobile before in 2012 or before, but it was a desert. It was a dire situation. And the reality was, when I went out to do the market sizing for Facebook for the mobile app product, I heard the same thing over and over again. This was a key insight that actually led to us starting Thirdwave later down the road. But at the time, everyone I talked to, and some of these partners were big players on Facebook's games platform. We call it Canvas internally. I went out and talked to them, and they had games. So like a Kabam made a hard pivot over to mobile. If you guys remember, they were a massive player on Canvas, and they made a hard pivot to mobile very early, very, very, very wisely, which I can say now. At the time, it was painful. But they made this pivot. And I talked to the head of UA there, and they told me, I don't think, Peter, we love Facebook. It's not going to be a thing in mobile. And I said, why? And it's because ads isn't going to be a thing. It's all about communities. It's all about charting. So charting, for those of you who weren't around in those days, charting was this kind of crazy concept that if you got above the fold in the App Store rankings, that you would get a huge amount of volume. And John, I'm sure you experienced this with some of your apps. The problem is the quality was very, very low. And so what they would use ads for is to actually drive charting to get them up above the fold, and then the organic would carry them. What they told me then was that organic users were worth 3 to 4 times more than paid users. And that made absolutely no sense to me, because on our Canvas product, we saw the exact opposite of that. And so that was a key insight. That is true today in Web3. It hopefully will not be true very soon. But that was a key insight that led to us starting Thirdwave. Was we heard the same story again, except instead of community and charting, we heard community and airdrops. And so there's a need for these tools. When we launched, our hypothesis was that by launching with both our volume of impressions, right, the eyeballs we were able to reach, but our quality of targeting, with our quality of targeting in particular, when we launched, we knew we would change the game. And so a market size that was $400 million globally spent on mobile app ads would expand from 400 million to who knows how much, but big. Now Facebook does probably $20 billion a year on mobile app install alone, based on that relationship flipping between paid and organic because of the targeting. The targeting is the most critical element. All of them are key pieces in the stool, but the keystone of this is really the ability to effectively target users, which is what has been missing entirely from Web3 to date.
All right. So one of the questions from the community here is from Downey. Downey, thanks for your question. We've seen you here a bunch, and you always ask great questions. But it's this question of privacy, advertising data. So I think a lot of people don't even realize when they are using a blockchain wallet, you are putting this permanent data out there about how the wallet is being used. And some people who are kind of deep in crypto native, that inherently. I think maybe a lot of newcomers just aren't aware of it. But how do you think about this privacy question? It's a little bit different than web browsers and cookies and all the other things that people were worried about in the past.
Yeah, it's a really big one. It's something that honestly is one of the benefits of blockchains. These are all this today. Your identity is tied back to these mobile identifiers, and historically there was, way back in the day, Apple even had a UDID, which was a unified, I think it was a universal device identifier. But the UDID was a persistent identifier that linked to you. And so the benefit of this is pseudonymous. The benefit of this is you can always move between wallets. And then we really look at this as privacy forward in a lot of ways. And this going back to this idea that users can be at the center of the value exchange is a massive, massive advantage. And so if you don't want to be, if you don't want to harvest any of the benefit of history, that is totally doable. You could create a new wallet for every application you work with. And it's easy to anonymize yourself or to keep those from being unlinked. I think ultimately people look at privacy in this scenario as personal privacy. And so my personal information isn't ever part of this. And then the second thing is, what's in it for me? And so for the first time, the people who've been getting rich off of your information are the big ad networks out there that also offer a great product, right? Today, actually, people can be rewarded for their relative value because of the wallet ID. And so I think the value exchange is there, but this is not without potential concerns of having data used for commercial purposes.
So I'll give just an example of how some of this on-chain data is being used at Beamable, since I'm familiar with it. So as I think a lot of folks here in the audience realize, we're doing a token launch later this year. We're running leaderboards for the airdrop. One of the things that we have to do in launching this token is have a lot of conversations with the exchanges where the token can potentially be listed. And guess what? They care about things such as how many people are in the community, but more importantly, not who they are, but what are they doing with their wallets. So that's one of the reasons why when you sign up for a community hub and to qualify for the leaderboards, you link your Solana wallet with that. And what that allows us to do is actually go to the exchanges and say, look, here's the 300,000 or 400,000 wallets that have signed up for Beamable. And they've got actual transactions. Yeah. They've used their wallets, and this is all public on-chain data. It doesn't know who you are. Like, unless I suppose you can link it to like these identity services where you get like your personal domain name. If you opt into those kind of things and you want to attach an identity to your wallet, that's something that you can choose to do. But in general, it's just anonymous data that tells us the kinds of transactions and things that our community are participating in. And it's powerful for us as a company because it means that we can get onto better exchanges and have much more for you to that we return back to you, frankly, in the community. So on an individual basis, that data isn't worth too much, but in an aggregate basis, that we can take that and show here's what our community actually looks like and take that to an exchange. That's really, really valuable. And ultimately you're participating in the airdrops in the community. Hopefully, number one, because you believe in Beamable and what we're going to do for games and lower the cost for game developers and help them build an ecosystem so that we all get to play better games. Hopefully, that's the number one reason you're there. But if you care about things like value accrual on the token, well, guess what? That's something that the exchange is going to care about. And even if you don't care about personal value accrual, you will care about the token accumulating some amount of value, because that's what allows us to build that flywheel that we've kind of been talking about already, where we have the community, we have the people who are providing supply, the network, we have the game developers who are trying to launch on there. Like, the more that value flywheel increases over time, the more the Beamable network project actually can bring to everybody through that value creation. And Peter, you've been helping us do a lot of that analysis. So you've been digging into the data, both to help us quantify that, also to help with another aspect, which sometimes our community asks questions about, which is like, hey, what about all these people on the leaderboard who seem to be cheating? Like, we're looking at things like Sybil analysis and like, who's actually just one account that's actually 100 or 1,000 or in some cases 10,000 accounts. Like, we're watching that, right? And that's part of the qualification criteria for participating in the leaderboard, is you have to pass a lot of actual analytical tests that we run that are getting stronger and stronger over time. So we've also heard from the community that you want that because you want it to be a fair competition. And with on-chain data, we can do it. Peter, I'll turn it over to you to talk about any aspect of that.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting is go back 2 years ago and no one cared about quality at all. The exchanges didn't care about quality. The projects didn't care about quality. Everyone was just trying. There were vanity metrics were king and queen. And frankly, quality was a distraction and would potentially narrow the funnel for a project like you guys. Today, people have realized, the investors have realized, investors are asking us for this data. The exchanges are asking us for this data. Partners like, a huge number of tokens that have launched well have done this exact same type of research that Beamable does with our participation. And that is a big shift that is moving in the right direction when you think about the long-term viability of our ecosystem. Our ecosystem will not be viable if all of the value of this beautiful primitive of Web3, which is this value exchange and the community building, if all of it's fake. We need real users doing real things, capturing real utility from these applications in order to actually have value accrue. And so I get very, very optimistic as we see that. The way that we built out our product was very, very purposeful. And so we started off with, we wanted to help people understand the data that was available on chain. So how could you understand the relative quality of users in a given application? And so we built a product that was essentially like an App Annie for Web3. The second thing that we built was, the next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to make it possible to make decisions based on that data. And so we built out our wallet intelligence product, which is the product that we're utilizing to support projects like Beamable. And that gives people data that they can then make decisions off of. There are very obvious things you want to filter out in an airdrop, but it's really hard to get to that data, really, really hard. And so from bots and Sybil to fresh wallets. There are a bunch of different things, patterns that you look for. And then the final thing is our Wave network, which we launched in beta in May, which is the ability to now take all of that data and be able to target those users in places where Web3 users are. And so today, the Wave network, we're at capacity in our beta. Although we have a wait list if there are people out there that are looking to grow their project. We do have a wait list that we're building that we could put people on. What we do there is we take that data and we say, all right, now that we know this, one key element of how growth is going to happen is we've got to go and reach people outside of Web3 places. And so today, where do you find Web3 people? Well, it's either a needle in a haystack inside of Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, etc. The best platforms in the world for advertising, right? Except it's a needle in a haystack because you need to get through this wallet wall. Do they even have a wallet? Do they care about crypto? Or you go into very, very narrow ad networks that just don't have enough volume of users in there. Because everyone on this call right now is Web3 native. What percentage of your time is spent in a Web3 application? 10% max? And so you're on the internet all day long. I'm on the internet all day long. 10% at most is in a wallet-aware system or application. 10% at most, which means 90% of the time that I'm available to capture as an advertiser is unusable without targeting the targeting that the Wave network brings. And so what we bring is the ability to go to Facebook, to go to Reddit, to go to X, to go to Google, to go to TikTok, and reach people based on wallet attributes. And so you can say, I want to go out and reach people who are NFT enthusiasts. I want to go out and reach people who are DeFi, who are heavy DeFi investors or have a wallet over X. You can do that, and it gives you greater scalability with the marketing that you're running. Now, those other Web3 platforms are great. There are a bunch of them that I think are really good, but they're not as good as Facebook, right? They're not as good as Google. They've had a couple years, not a couple decades to build, and a much smaller distribution.
Yeah. So what's so hard about building an ad network like what Facebook has?
Yeah. Well, how hard could that possibly be? Yeah. This is it's funny because a lot of people are focused on these like Web3 ad networks. And I think they're building good stuff. I've seen some really unique things out there that I think are really cool. But until you have volume, it's really hard to build a viable business. Like when we just don't have volume. In order to have volume, you need to have engaged users of high utility applications. And so otherwise you're not reaching people. So if you dropped into Coinbase has tons of users. That would be a great place. And their early ads work, I think, has been promising, and I'm very long on what they could build, what the wallets could build. I expect to see some of the biggest wallets, and obviously Coinbase has those too. The biggest wallets, they're going to be able to run really viable ads businesses, but the long tail of applications don't have enough volume of users today to run real ads businesses. Even in aggregate. It's very, 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 very small.
So, Peter, two kind of related questions to that. So when people link their wallet to a Web3 application, they're not necessarily linking the wallet that has all their assets in it. For example, it's often just sort of like the one that they use to sign into, that they're not too worried about being drained if they mess up, because that is a problem in Web3. Is like signing the wrong thing, running the wrong smart contract, and suddenly your wallet's drained, which is a problem very unique to Web3 versus the rest of the financial world. But the kind of the question for you though is, how much harder does that make your problem when people's wallets are more like their own network of affiliated wallets? That's different from the one they're using for sign-in. And on top of that, you also have a lot of the activity is happening in centralized exchanges still, where the activity you have inside the centralized exchange is essentially opaque. It's not part of the chain transactional world until it gets to the point of batching it up into a whole lot of other bigger transactions all at once. How do you think these challenges?
So there's two things that I think that are gonna be patterns that are gonna make advertising more difficult in Web3. One is exactly what you just talked about, which is the proliferation of wallet creation. And so there's all kinds of incentives for why people would want to create net new wallets. That is something that needs to be solved in order to get really good at this. Now, does it need to be solved for every single user? No, because they're always going to be the type of people that use privacy browsers. There's the pop-up blocker. There's always going to be a profile of user that is going to take whatever steps they need to protect their privacy, and they should be able to do that. But I think it is a problem that we've solved, So we built out what we call our UBID, Unified Blockchain Identifier. The Unified Blockchain Identifier we patented it. We were granted a patent. And what it does is it takes on-chain behavior and links through a bunch of different patterns. It identifies patterns and then links those users back together probabilistically to a single profile. And so these are highly, highly associated wallets that we would say are very likely, if they're not the same person, they're brothers or best friends. They're very, very closely linked. And so that is very effective. The way around that, there are lots of ways around that people already choose to do that do want to be really private. The people who want to keep the snoopers from being able to figure out whose wallet is what, they go back through a centralized exchange. So if you go back into an omnibus wallet, then everything's everything is anonymized again. And so linking back after someone's gone through an anonymized wallet does protect. So if someone wants to prevent that sort of thing, that's possible there. Today, what we do is we take that data, we enrich the data for our individual users. And when we're targeting users, we say, this is what we know about them personally, right? This is the pattern of this specific wallet. The second thing is, this is what we know. This is what we know about their associated wallets, and so we weight them differently based on the strength of that association with our UBID. But ultimately, then we take that and say, okay, this has a very strong signal of DeFi usage across their associated wallets, even though this wallet only has $10 in it and very few transactions. We can target this person as a DeFi user.
So to me, the most valuable thing that we could ever do back at Disruptor Beam when I was launching and operating games was anything we could do to predict whether someone was going to actually end up spending money based on the very early behaviors. We spent so much time and effort doing all kinds of machine learning, data mining, everything we could on that. Really, like the platforms like Facebook kind of had some hooks for that, but it wasn't really able to run on its own. We had to kind of use a combination of those systems and a lot of our own internal heuristics and analytics to figure it out. But when a game company was able to do that, like, it's extremely valuable, because then it just becomes like managing an asset. Like, how much capital do you want to deploy behind UA because you know it's going to produce this return over a period of time? Is predictability of the outcome easier, harder with this blockchain data? Is it the same thing again?
It is, I would say it's easier to some extent. The scale of it is more limited. And so what you run into is you just have fewer users in blockchain than you had in mobile or in across the online distribution. You just have fewer users, and so there's less data. So the whales are huge, and you know they're whales, and so you can with simple kind of LTV calculations, you can, figure out what this person's value is, but there are going to be fewer of them just because of the nature of the ecosystem today. I think in the future, John, like this is in the future that I think most of us believe in the ecosystem. If we're not, I don't know why we'd be here. There's going to be massive value in the predictability. So we predict with high fidelity engagement. We predict with high fidelity the likely impact of a user of having a holder hold your asset, the impact they'll have on the relative price of that asset. And so we're doing a bunch of different things that are very, very good. We've built an LTV model, but a lot of that is so dependent on the individual application that we can do with custom stuff. We can be pretty, we can get pretty targeted with people, but on a broad scale, it's a little harder to say anything other than like, this person's a really high value user because their pattern is that they spend. If you think about the patterns that you used in a traditional world, in a mobile world, in a Web 2 world, you use the patterns of these are the interactions they had in the first 3 days. This is the basket size that they created and dropped, or this is what their first purchase was, $3 or $30. And so then you could build an LTV off of that. Imagine a world where you get to do that across their entire blockchain history. And so from the moment they come in, you can change the way you treat them because you have all the signals of the full lifespan of other applications you have to be able to build your LTV.
You've mentioned a couple of times that one of the limiting factors for Web3 is just the scale that's currently available. What is the scale that we've got now, and how much would that scale have to grow to be more comparable, not to mobile today, which is like the planet, but like mobile at the earlier stage of development where you were really able to deploy some of these tools and technologies back at Facebook, for example?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's the right question. So what we see is on average, people have 4.2 wallets. And so that's what we're seeing. We have 1.1 billion wallets across the chains that we've indexed. And so you're looking at somewhere in the like 200 to 300 million unique user range. Now, that's not perfect because none of this probabilistic stuff is perfect, but it is a fairly good sense of what the scale is today. That's big. It's just not big enough based on the usage. So the problem is the like essentially the DAU to MAU. And so those wallets exist, but a lot of them are inactive. A lot of those users are inactive, but like maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter. And so what needs to happen is not necessarily that we need that many more users. This is my perspective. You might have a better perspective on this given what you guys do. But what we need to see, my perspective is what we need to see is not just more users, that would be great, but a shift in the use case away from speculation and value harvesting and towards true on-chain utility, where people are going on, they're interacting with an application, with their wallet, and the blockchain element of that is adding some incremental value to that experience, so much so that you start to have engagement that's more similar to mobile type engagement.
Well, my feeling is it's going to grow up at the infrastructure level rather than the retail level, frankly, because one of the most powerful things about blockchains and smart contracts is simply the ability to do exchange of value at the protocol level. So let me just explain what I mean by that for the audience, for people who are hearing terms like composability and stuff for the first time. So there's a ton of protocols on the internet. It's everything from TCP/IP, which we just use to actually connect things together, and then higher level, you might think of them as application level protocols. Things like the domain name system are built on top of TCP/IP and let you do things like name an IP address. That's just an example. All of these protocols, whether it's that or email or browsing a website, all of these things don't have a built-in exchange of value capability in them. So then what you have is things like websites that add things like payment processing on top of them, where if you want to do a very specific thing, you can pay for it in the moment. So you can sign up for Amazon and they'll save your credit card information and you can buy the thing from them. But to really have a composable internet where you've got lots of plug-in pieces that work together, and then application developers compose or assemble applications from all those pieces together. Now, today you can do that with, say, open source technologies. And when it's just code that you bring into your application that you've brought off the open source web and helps you build your app, that's fine. But when it's a services driven component, meaning you've got to tap into resources on the internet, there's some amount of orchestration or collaboration across parties. If you want to harness actual infrastructure where you're using people's capital equipment to do a particular task, or AI is a really interesting use case around that. If you want to do a particular kind of AI inference on a data set for yourself, all of those things, you're either going to have to set up a zillion little, API subscriptions where you're paying with your credit card or your bank account every time you sign up for those, or we have something that's much more blockchain enabled, where the payment is essentially a handshake exchange of value through a smart contract where you have your wallet. And when you subscribe to that service, you give it enough data so that it can charge you for the services that you've done, or you pay for it in advance to get the service. And a subscription per se, you just pay for service, you get the service in response. So that's composability. And where blockchain really changes that is the idea that this exchange of value is no longer like this extra thing where you have to sign up with accounts and clear people's credit or give your credit card. Like, the exchange of value is just built into the protocol, which allows an exponential lift in the way that you can actually compose applications. Yeah. So that's one of the really inherent benefits of Web3. It's like what we ultimately are leaning into with Beamable on our own decentralized physical infrastructure network project, because we see a day where just provisioning a computer on the internet to do work for you or scale up your game or whatever it is, it's just something that's kind of built into the internet. When we first talked about cloud, I mean, we're talking now 25, 30 years ago. When people started talking about cloud, it's that old now. They talked about it as, this is going to be like electricity. You plug your computer in, or you plug your web browser in more accurately, and you just access all this stuff. It's like electricity. But the cloud is nothing like that. Cloud is, you pay for something, you get someone to set something up for you, and then you get to access their equipment. True cloud, in the way it was envisioned back then, is this composable internet where the value exchange is just integrated at the level of the protocols that you're doing. So that opens up this whole world where, for example, Peter, knowing the history of wallets and the analysis around it and being able to value them, for example, like the stuff you do, becomes almost a packaged service where you do a value exchange on chain, you get that data, you can compile it into whole other applications. And that, I think, opens up a lot of opportunity for developers like you who are creating those solutions, because it increases your surface area of who can actually connect into you and pay you for the services you provide.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny, as you were talking about that, it's, the strategy or the vision that you articulated very clearly is how Stripe is thinking about this. Like, look at the Bridge acquisition. So now they have they acquire Bridge. Now they have stablecoins. So that persistent value. Then they acquire Privy. Like, now they have the wallet layer. This feels like a really kind of, they are executing your vision for how this like fundamentally comes together. They're executing it real time. And I think that last piece is, someone's going to need to drive growth. And I hope that someone is actually I hope there's many of us. I would love to be just us. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. I think there need to be a bunch of different tools, some of them more innovative and native, some of them more traditional, but that needs to happen. And so I don't know if it'd be helpful, but we have what I call the Web3 hierarchy of growth, which might be an interesting complement to what you just took us through, which is what are we really blocked by here? And I've shared this with a bunch of different people, but never publicly. So I will share it now.
Wow. All right. So strap in. We've got 900 people here watching live, and
good.
You're going to get some alpha direct from Peter.
I think I can trust you guys to keep this between us, right?
Keep it between the 900 people watching now and the 200,000 replays we're going to get for sure.
Just the 900 of us. Okay, I don't actually know how to share this. Why don't I send this to you? Let me send this. Oh,
you can click present and then share screen in the lower part, or Oscar can bring it online.
I did that.
Yeah, I'm ready to receive it, but you should be able to share it. It's publicly visible, right?
It will be momentarily.
All
right, drum roll.
Boom. All right. So the hierarchy, are you guys familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Or I guess John in this case, I would assume you are. So what we've thought about is there's this major blocker that exists in the ecosystem in that there are these pieces that are they're missing. If you could blow that up for us, Oscar, that'd be awesome. Just share or slideshow. Click slideshow. See if it goes full screen.
Yep.
So when we think about this what is blocking Web3 growth, the first thing is this trust and security layer. And so John mentioned this earlier. It's like if we're all gonna get robbed every fucking time, excuse my language, if we're all gonna get robbed every time we try and use a wallet, we're in real trouble, right? And luckily the industry has moved past that. But still is still a real risk. It's just not what it was a few years ago. So we've made a lot of progress there. Frictionless onboarding is the next step here. And so frictionless onboarding, the way that I think about this is that wallet wall. So I've talked about this a lot over the years. One of the issues that we ran into when we initially put in place the auth dialogue, you'll remember, John, on Facebook, was we collapsed everyone's user acquisition funnel when we put in place this requirement that a user had to allow this application to have this data, to do these things, etc. Back in the early days, like the Farmville days, you could get on Farmville and then they could be posting on your behalf on your friends' pages.
Which help me get the level up my barn.
Crazy now to think of, but we put this auth in place. And what we found was it was too heavy of a lift, too early. We forced developers to put it at the very front. So someone would click on an ad, they would show up and be this scary screen. I don't even know if I like this game. And suddenly you're asking me if I'm willing to share all my friends' birthdays. The answer is no. And so we collapsed the user acquisition funnel. The same exact thing has been happening with what I call the wallet wall. And so the wallet wall is this idea, and it's getting far, far better. But you come in, oh my God, I'm so excited to play this game, to interact with this application, etc. Now sync your wallet. All you have to do is sign. This is a crazy thing to ask before you've delivered any value, before you've validated that this is something that they want to interact with. This is happening. And so you look at Phantom, you look at a bunch of these different wallets that are out there. MetaMask has done a very good job of bringing down that wallet wall as well. That's a problem. But until you solve 1 and 2, you shouldn't even bother worrying about the rest of them. Level 3 is scalable growth tools. You'll notice that I put organic discovery and fully on-chain ads above at the highest point. So those of you who are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the top is the nice to have, the bottom is the you can't survive without it, right? In quickest terms. Organic discovery is great, but it is not as critical as having scalable growth tools. And fully on-chain ads, as someone who's been in crypto since 2016 and has drank the Kool-Aid, I really want to see this. And I believe that those primitives that we talked about will make that really powerful. But frankly, we're just not ready for it. It's not a scalable solution. The ecosystem isn't ready, and it's not going to solve our growth issues, most importantly. And so that is very much a nice to have. And so this is how I think about this, like, how does Web3 unlock? Well, in the simplest terms, you march through these levels. You make sure that each of these exists. That is a wild oversimplification of, 5 levels that are all very, very complicated problems to solve. So
Yeah,
I'll that down now.
Yeah, one of the things we tell game developers that are building on us is that unless you're targeting a super heavy duty crypto native audience, and there are some games like that actually, but in general, that's not the way to growth. The way to do it is don't even introduce anything around crypto or Web3 or wallets or anything until way late in the game. Like you've already been playing for hours and hours and you're loving it. You're socializing and you're connecting with people in the game, and then you discover that there's a cool place you can go to buy and trade items because you're going to deepen your experience and love of the game by doing that. Only at that point does a wallet become relevant. Until then, either play anonymously or use a social login, since Facebook and Google logins are still pretty prolific everywhere. Just keep it really simple. Now that presents that's a good UX from the end user standpoint. It feels like it might introduce new challenges for what you're trying to do, though, because that signature when you first log into the game, at least you captured the wallet ID, and we can relate it back to all this on-chain data about that player, versus them just showing up and essentially playing anonymously and not having the on-chain data. How do you think of that, Peter?
Yeah, I think honestly, this is I don't think that if you choke off the top of the funnel, I don't think any of us are going to benefit, right? This is, actually, why don't we share that at the end, Oscar? I think the point is a really good one, and it doesn't benefit me in the near term. It very much benefits me in the long term. And like, I believe deeply in this ecosystem. I believe I really want to see activation happen. And if products are able to thrive, then we're going to be in a great place, right? If products are able to launch and grow and build deep users of passionate communities, like, we're all going to benefit from that. And so I think the like short term, I'd rather have people keep push back the wallet wall or break it up than frankly capture that data that in a poorly used application.
So don't get too clever on data analytics upfront at the expense of just getting people in and enjoying.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think your point, it's a really good one. I think this is something people just really need to be focused on. The way that we solved, so you brought this up, the way that we solved the problem at Facebook back in the day was very similar to what you were suggesting. So what we did was we linked the ask to value. And so what we told to developers was, hey, here's the best practice. Ask them for that data when you're able to give them something, and not actually give them something every time, but once you've given them value of like, oh, this game's really fun. Or if there's some engagement, like, hey, if you give us your friends' birthdays, then we can build that into this. Once there's an exchange versus a like, thou shall not pass kind of bridge troll, it is a far better way to optimize the conversion rate.
I love that. I love that bridge troll analogy. I'm gonna be using that again in the future. Peter, we're coming to the end of our hour here, and it just whizzed by. We had so much to talk about. Probably talk 4 hours about this, but sadly we got 1 hour. We got nearly 1,000 people who tuned in to watch this live. So it's a subject that a lot of people are interested in. So what should people know if they want to learn more about this topic or learn more about Thirdwave?
Yeah, I am first off, flattered that as many people joined. I think they joined for you, Jon, not for me, but hopefully there was some value. Hopefully you guys found some value. Follow me on Twitter. I would love to connect with you directly if you want to hit me up, if I can help you to grow. If your project needs help growing, let us know. So you can submit in on our online form, or you can just DM me on Twitter. And please give me feedback. Hit me up directly and let me know, or in the comments in Twitter when this gets posted, or X, excuse me. I would love to hear your feedback, or if you disagree or agree with anything, I'd love to continue the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. This has been informative for everybody. It's great to see people pioneering these new sort of extensions to the Web3 ecosystem to help with growth. We're using it at Beamable, so I can definitely tell you, like, if this is something that you care about, definitely seek out Peter and see what he can do for your Web3 business. I know there's a lot of game developers, application developers, deep-in people who are tuning in. And for all of you in the community here, yes, please follow Peter. Please follow me if you're not doing that quite yet, but also follow Beamable Network, because that's where you actually need to be to learn about the DPIN launch, the token launch, all that stuff that's coming over the next few months. And please sign up those friends, get friends that have wallets with a bunch of transactions, and smart followers. Get them to follow all the project X accounts, because believe it or not, X accounts are so incredibly important. We still call it CT, crypto Twitter. It's still a thing. The exchanges care about it, and it helps us, and it helps you by helping us when that happens. Peter, thanks again for being here. This has been a blast. You're welcome to come back anytime, and maybe we'll put a little panel together in the future on growth in Web3 or something.
I would love that. That'd be great. Thank you. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.